Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. The opposite of war is not always peace. Ask Ukraine. They have been looking at a Russian build-up for months now. And there is now talk of a de-escalation. There is talk of Russia pulling back its soldiers. But Ukraine's Western allies are not convinced. Today there was an attack in Donbas, in an area controlled by Ukraine. Now Russia says it is in fact pulling back troops. It has already pulled back troops from Crimea. And they will also conclude their exercises with Belarus by the 20th, as was scheduled earlier. But the Americans say that Russia has in fact added 7,000 soldiers. So where is this build-up going? Where is this conflict going? Tonight on Gravitas, we'll bring you up to speed with what's happening. Is diplomacy delivering? What are American allies saying? And what will a solution to this crisis look like? We'll discuss all of that. Also on the show, we're looking at what's happening in China. Hong Kong is running out of hospital beds as Wuhan virus cases explode. Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy is failing again. In the US, a teen brawl has exposed racism in the country. The police intervened after this brawl. The white boy is seated on a couch. The black is handcuffed. No condemnation yet from President Joe Biden. Justin Trudeau has now upset the Hindu community of Canada. They say the Prime Minister's statements will make them victims of hate crimes. We'll tell you what this is all about. And the Iran nuclear deal is quote-unquote closer than ever. Europe says the ball is now in Tehran's court. We'll bring you the latest. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
French President Emmanuel Macron has announced that France will withdraw its troops from Mali. The EU will also follow suit and pull back troops. These soldiers have been involved in the fight against Islamic militants in Mali for nearly a decade. The decision to leave comes after a breakdown in diplomatic relations with the country's military regime. In Pakistan, opposition parties have decided to bring a no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Imran Khan. The announcement was made after a meeting of the multi-party opposition alliance in Islamabad. Pakistan is facing multiple economic challenges causing difficulties for citizens. Inflation touched 13% in January. Pakistan's trade deficit has also increased to almost $25 billion. India's Ministry of Foreign Affairs calls the statement of Singapore Prime Minister on India's lawmakers uncalled for. During a debate in the parliament, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said that there are criminal charges pending against majority of Indian parliamentarians, including charges of rape and murder. India is set to sign a trade and investment agreement with the United Arab Emirates on Friday. The Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement will be signed during a virtual meeting. The agreement aims to more than double the bilateral trade in goods to $100 billion within 5 years. Heavy rains and landslides have wreaked havoc in the Brazilian mountain city of Petrópolis. Local officials say that at least 94 people have died. Videos shared on social media showed widespread damage and vehicles floating in the streets. Apple's shareholders are being urged to oppose Tim Cook's $99 million pay package. An advisory group has told Apple's shareholders that Cook's remuneration is not in line with his performance. They also said it has significant concerns over the size of the sum. In 2021, Mr. Cook's pay was 1,447 times more than the wage of an average Apple employee. NASA's latest explorer, XP, has shared its very first images. The imaging data shows the remnants of Cassiopeia A, a supernova or an exploding star. This star exploded in the 17th century. Gas and cosmic ray particles around it made a cloud that glows purple in X-ray light. Sydney has reported the first fatal shark attack in nearly 60 years. Several beaches had to be closed. A video shared online shows a shark attacking a swimmer at Sydney's Little Bay Beach. Drones have been deployed as officials are still searching for the shark in the area. Russian skater Kamila Valieva has missed out on a podium place in the women's singles skating event at the Beijing Winter Olympics. All eyes were on the 15-year-old amid a major doping controversy, but she failed to live up to her favorite tag by making several errors. She finished fourth as her compatriots Anna Sherbakova and Alexandra Trusova claimed gold and silver. Liverpool have taken command of their Champions League round of 16 tie against Inter Milan after a 2-0 victory at the San Siro. The Italian champions failed to take advantage of their early superiority and were punished by late goals from Roberto Firmino and Mohamed Salah. Meanwhile, German giants Bayern Munich salvaged a 1-1 draw at the Red Bull Salzburg, courtesy of a late strike from Kingsley Coman.
Yesterday we told you about an invasion that did not happen, a prophecy of Western intelligence. They said Ukraine will be invaded on Wednesday. That did not happen, but something else did. The attack in Donbas. We have accessed a video clip. This is from Donetsk. It was shared on social media, and this is what it shows.
Слышно, да? Всем слышно? Всем слышно, да? Да там, блин, я переживаю вообще. У меня ребенок в школе, блин. Февраля. Слышно, да? Всем слышно? Всем слышно, да?
What you saw there was the sound of shelling. There was shelling in the Luhansk region too. Bombs fell on a school, a kindergarten. Let me show you those pictures. One of the walls has been completely destroyed. Thankfully, no one was hurt. But imagine the horror had there been children inside. Who is responsible for this? Ukraine is blaming Russian separatists for what happened here. So while Russia may not have invaded, has it intensified its proxy war? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss that. The focus clearly is on Donbas. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made a big charge. He says Ukraine has committed a genocide in Donbas. Russia says it has found mass graves in the region. Hundreds of Russian-speaking civilians have been buried, and that they died in Ukrainian shelling. Now, these charges are not new. They've been floating around for a while now. Last week, we heard something similar. A leader of a Russian separatist group made the same statement. He spoke of a genocide. What Russia is doing now is officially backing such claims. But do they have any proof? Well, nothing substantial so far, but voices of pro-Russian leaders in Donetsk are getting louder. Today, they accuse the Ukrainian forces of ceasefire violations.
In the last 24 hours, the situation on the contact line has been exacerbated dramatically. The enemy is trying to escalate that conflict by the direct order of Kyiv military and political leadership.
Again, there is no proof of this. So are we witnessing a Russian false flag operation? Is Moscow creating a pretext for an invasion? Ukraine is beefing up its border deployments. More guards are being stationed at the Ukraine-Belarus border. 9,000 Russian soldiers are in Belarus, and they're conducting drills near the same border. And they're within striking distance of Kiev. Ukraine says the situation is stable as of now, but they do not want to take any chances.
The situation at the border is stable and under control. We stepped up border defense. Due to the available data, we increased the number of troops at the border. We also deployed reaction groups to react immediately if the situation changes.
What about Russia? It says it will end the exercises in Belarus on the 20th, as was announced earlier. And that's a good sign. But Russia is essentially sending mixed signals. No promises of a de-escalation, but some troop withdrawal. More troops are being pulled back from Crimea. Russian state press released some videos. But Washington is not convinced. It says Russia is not withdrawing soldiers. It is, in fact, sending more soldiers to the border. 7,000 more Russian soldiers have been deployed. This is what the U.S. has said.
To be very, very clear, we have not seen that. In fact, we have seen the opposite in recent weeks and even in recent days. More Russian forces, not fewer, are at the border, and they are moving, concerningly, into fighting positions. This is cause for profound concern.
America says Russian troops are in fighting position. Europe agrees with that. They do not believe Russian claims of withdrawal. Defense ministers of NATO countries met again today. They said that Russia is spoiling for war and looking for a pretext to begin one.
So we are concerned that Russia is trying to stage a pretext for an armed attack against Ukraine. It is still no clarity, no certainty about the Russian intentions. We don't know what will happen, but what we do know is that Russia has amassed the biggest force we have seen in Europe for decades in and around Ukraine.
The crisis in Ukraine is breathing new life into NATO. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the alliance, the NATO alliance, found it hard to justify its existence. But now it is talking about expansion. NATO's military commanders have been given marching orders. Make plans for new combat units. That's what they've been told. These units will be stationed in two regions, Central and Southeastern Europe. They could be set up in 4 countries, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary and Slovakia. How many new units are we talking about? How many is NATO planning? 4. They will have a total of 4,000 soldiers. France has already offered to lead one of these units in Romania. Now, NATO already has a sizable presence across Europe. There are 4 multinational combat units. They have some 5,000 troops. Officers from the United States, Germany, Canada and Britain are leading these units. Now, they're stationed in 4 countries, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. 5,000 troops might be a small number, but NATO has the option to dramatically scale up deployments if it decides to go to war. Even before this conflict began, the United States had 80,000 troops across Europe. They're stationed permanently on different bases. And these deployments are rotational, meaning America keeps switching the troops there. There is permanent American presence. But since this crisis began, the U.S. has shifted some troops closer to Ukraine. 4,700 troops have been deployed in Poland, plus an unspecified number of fighter jets. Poland is important because it shares a border with Ukraine, just like Romania. And American troops are in Romania too. Around 1,000 of them have been recently repositioned from Germany. Some 300 service members were also sent to Germany. Basically, NATO members are doing exactly what they're accusing Russia of doing, building troops. So NATO may say it won't join the war, but it's certainly preparing for one. The only problem is that Ukraine is not a NATO member. Ukraine's president wants to change that. Volodymyr Zelensky wants Ukraine to join the NATO. He says a NATO membership will guarantee Ukraine's security and that there is no other path for his country. Now, that's one of the sticking points in the standoff. Is Ukraine's NATO ambition part of the problem or part of the solution? And what would a solution to this crisis look like? That's in our next story. They say the history of mankind is a history of war. Over the years, that history has grown. We started with swords and spears. We upgraded to muskets and cannons, and now we have missiles and bombs. Yet one thing has not changed, and that is the role of oil. Oil is a strange commodity, you see. You fight for oil, and you fight using oil. And this standoff in Ukraine is no different. Oil is a deciding factor for Russia too. And I will tell you how. Russia produces 10% of the world's oil. It makes up 25% of their export revenue. So if oil is more expensive, it's good news for Russia. It means more money for them. But for the US, it means the opposite. The United States is the largest consumer of crude oil. And if oil is more expensive, it means higher inflation for the United States of America. Here's something else that you must know. Oil is very sensitive. It hates uncertainty. So the crisis in Ukraine is driving up prices of oil. If war breaks out, oil could cross $100 a barrel. America wants to stop that. What's their strategy? To ask Saudi Arabia for help. They want Riyadh to produce more oil. It's really simple economics. More supply equals low prices. Right now, Saudi Arabia is producing 10 million barrels per day. Their maximum capacity is 12 million barrels per day. If Saudi Arabia agrees to increase production, oil will stabilize. And that's what Joe Biden is trying to do. He spoke to Saudi Arabia's King Salman. He did that last week. On Wednesday, he sent White House officials to Riyadh. Still no luck. Saudi Arabia is sticking to its OPEC plus commitments. Who does that commitment benefit? Russia. Moscow is part of the OPEC plus cartel. Together, they decided to limit oil production to drive up prices, and Riyadh is not willing to change that policy, not even for the United States of America. What explains this snub? Well, we can think of two reasons. Reason number one, Joe Biden's cold shoulder to Saudi Arabia. He's refused to meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He pulled out of the war in Yemen, and he declassified documents linking Saudi Arabia to 9/11. Saudi officials to 9/11. This is Riyadh's chance to get even with them. Reason number two, practical considerations. Higher oil prices don't just benefit Russia, they benefit Saudi Arabia too. If Russia's pullback is genuine, oil will stabilize anyway. Saudi Arabia will not have to increase output, which brings us to the bigger question. Is Russia's pullback genuine? What's next in this months-long standoff? Things may cool down for now, but it won't be permanent. This is a simple case of impossible demands. What Putin wants, NATO cannot give. What NATO wants, Putin cannot accept. And neither side is famous for concessions. So how will this conflict play out? For now, it seems that Russia has ruled out invasion. Their economy cannot bankroll it. Their military would suffer huge losses. So chances are Putin will opt for a safer option. Maybe spike the insurgency in Donbas or cripple Ukraine in cybersecurity. And NATO will not mind any of that. For them, avoiding war is priority number one. Anything below a full-blown conflict is a win for them. And they can go back to focusing on the Indo-Pacific or the Iran nuclear deal. It may sound like an attractive prospect, but it will not work in the long run. You see, conflicts have to be resolved, not ignored. If you put them on a back burner, they will fester. And we have multiple examples. The Korean War, for instance, there was a ceasefire, but there was no resolution. And the result is this. Today, we are dealing with a rogue nuclear state. Another example is Vietnam. Again, they had a ceasefire, but no resolution. A couple of years later, a war did break out there. Even in Donbas, in 2014, the Minsk Accord was signed. Again, it was a ceasefire, not a resolution. 8 years later, we are on the brink of war. So I'm going to repeat a cliche now. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. That's what America and Russia are doing as we speak, repeating the same mistakes. Ceasefires and stalemates are not the same as resolutions. Even if Russia retreats this time, the conflict will not end. It will only be delayed. And this delay could be used for mobilization. What kind of mobilization? More defense spending, more weapons, more allies. Maybe next time Russia and China will synchronize their attack. Putin targets Ukraine. Xi Jinping targets Taiwan. All of this remains very much possible. You see, peace is not the absence of war. It is the pursuit of progress. And Ukraine has a long way to go there. They have to tackle corruption, contain the oligarchs, fight the insurgency. And to do all of this, they need security. You cannot fight a war and achieve progress at the same time. For the moment, this is Ukraine's future. No war, but no peace either. If world powers are serious about resolving this crisis, they need to accept concessions and put their ego aside for once. Now, in the last 3 months, if the last 3 months can be termed as war, then it would be called an intelligence war, a war of intelligence or narrative. Just think about it. When was the last time so much critical information was made public on a daily basis? Possible dates of attack, troop deployment numbers, possible scenarios, even routes that the Russians could take if they were to invade Kiev. The kind of videos that could be used to stage a false flag attack, that too was shared. Everything was out in the open. Under normal circumstances, this material would be classified, put in a file, sealed, marked confidential, and moved clandestinely in the shadows of the night. But this time, information was flowing almost real time. It was being disbursed from the top. The White House had regular briefings. What explains all of this? Well, a long history of intelligence war. The CIA versus the KGB at one point. It dates back to the Cold War era. Our next report tells you all about it.
After the Second World War, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the two superpowers. One was a democracy, the other a communist regime. Their differences went beyond political structures. There was always a fear that the enemy was plotting. Both developed intelligence agencies. America had the CIA, the Soviet Union had the KGB. They planted agents in each other's territory, infiltrated power corridors, and stole critical information. These missions often involved assassinations, even proxy wars. They said if a CIA agent got to you, no one would know where or why you disappeared. But if a KGB agent got to you, no one would know you ever existed. The Russians were masters in spycraft. But did that help them win the intelligence war? In 1962, the CIA undertook one of its most daring missions. It infiltrated a Soviet research facility in the Arctic. It was freezing cold. The agents were paradropped, and they sent information using helium balloons. The intelligence gathered revealed that KGB was trying to detect and attack US submarines. Around the same time, KGB infiltrated the ARPANET, or the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. It was a kind of internet service. US research labs used it to share data. The Soviets stole information about the US shuttle program and managed to send their own space shuttle first. The CIA and KGB also fought for advantage in other countries. Afghanistan, for example. The CIA knew well in advance that the Soviets would be invading the South Asian country in 1979. So it trained local fighters and armed them with advanced weapons. When the Soviet army arrived in Afghanistan, they were surprised by the welcome fire. For the next decade, the CIA continued supplying Afghan fighters with arms, and they finally forced the Soviet Union to withdraw. India, too, was once a playground for the rival spy agencies. KGB files reveal that the agency once had 10 Indian newspapers on its payroll, where it planted articles and steered narratives. The KGB also had a code name for Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. She was Vano. Ukraine is the latest playground. It was Washington that first alerted Ukraine about Russian troop movements. That was in November 2021. Over the next 3 months, the US flooded the world with information directed towards the Kremlin. The motive was clear: to prove that the US had an intelligence advantage and it knew about Russia's next moves. The information warfare never snowballed into an exchange of fire, but the relentless reporting of this information resulted in some brilliant content. Central Intelligence Agency has given some great content for the silver screen. So, this is Russian media doing a mic drop.
Do you know what discrimination looks like? I'm sure you can all think of examples from your own life. You walk into a corporate boardroom, you only see men at the table. Why? Because of institutional discrimination. You go through the list of American presidents, you only see one black man. Why? Again, institutional discrimination. Tonight we have another example of this for you. This is what discrimination in the United States looks like.
Go under. No, right out there, girl. Right here. What are you gonna do? My face. Come outside, come outside. Oh! Yo! No. Chill. Brian, get up. Brian, leave. What the? Oh no! Holy no! This. Yeah. Yo, it's because he's black. Racially motivated. Where are cooking him?
Let me recap that for you. This incident happened in New Jersey. Two teenagers got into a heated argument. One was white, the other was black. We don't know how the argument broke out or what they were arguing about, but within seconds, things escalated. A fist fight broke out. Both teens were throwing punches at each other. And seeing this, the police arrived. They pulled the white teen aside and seated him on the couch. But look at what they did to the black teen. They slam him onto the floor, they roll him on his belly, and then they handcuff him. Well, this is what racism looks like. A white teen is let off while a black teen gets pinned by two cops. What exactly was his crime? Both of them were throwing punches. Both of them deserved the same punishment. Why was only one teenager harassed? Because he was black. You can hear people shouting this in the video too. You can hear them say racially motivated crime. And that's the only way to describe this. What are the authorities saying? Let me tell you what New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said. I'm deeply disturbed by what appears to be racially disparate treatment in this video. We are committed to increasing trust between law enforcement and the people they serve. Well, this is not about trust, really. This is about institutional racism. Police officers in the U.S. do not see a crime. They see color. And they decide who is guilty based on that color. The question is, how do you correct this? Does Joe Biden have a plan? Well, Biden, the presidential candidate, was full of passion. Listen to what he said in May 2020.
We need real police reform that hold cops to a higher standard that so many of them actually meet, that holds bad cops accountable, that repairs relationship between law enforcement and the community they're sworn to protect. This is a national crisis, and we need real leadership right now. Leadership that will bring everyone to the table so we can take measures to root out systemic racism.
Very well. What is Biden, the president, saying? Nothing. The White House is yet to make a comment. They're yet to say anything on what happened in New Jersey. How convenient is that? If something happens in a remote corner of Egypt, the White House will comment. If there's a crime in some tiny village in Bangladesh, the White House will sanction. Well, this happened in New Jersey, just 200 miles from Washington, D.C., but Joe Biden's White House has nothing to say. The president's track record on crime is a long list of failed promises. You just heard one of them. In 2020, he promised to root out systemic racism. How much of that has been achieved? No big reforms, no racial sensitivity training, and no punishment for past offenders. Biden's solution is to pour money on the problem. He wants Congress to approve two spending plans, $300 million for police departments and $200 million for community violence prevention programs. Put together, that's $500 million for the American police. Now, let me put that number in context. The entire military budget of Belarus is $480 million. The same Belarus that has nuclear-capable ballistic missiles, the same Belarus that is holding drills with the Russian army. You see, money is not the problem. The problem is attitude. American police officers need to be retrained. Racial sensitivity programs must be mandatory. Officers who refuse to change must be fired. And you don't need $500 million to do that. What you need is political will. Unfortunately, Biden is more focused on his popularity. Police unions hold considerable clout in the US. Last time around, they endorsed Donald Trump. So Biden is keen to win them over. He keeps repeating the same broken record, that these cops are not the real America. But looking at how frequently this is happening, we have to disagree. Turns out the real America is racist and unresponsive. For the moment, we'll shift to what's happening in Hong Kong. In Chinese-controlled Hong Kong, hospitals are overwhelmed. The Omicron-fueled Wuhan virus surge is pushing the city towards a total lockdown. More than 90% of the beds in isolation centers are occupied. Patients are being treated in tents. There is a shortage of testing kits. Food supplies have been disrupted. Our next report tells you more.
There is panic in Hong Kong. The Wuhan virus has brought the city to its knees. The daily infection rate has crossed the 4,000 mark, and the health system is struggling to keep up. These shocking scenes are from a hospital in Hong Kong. Patients are being treated in deplorable conditions. There are no beds left in this hospital, so patients are being treated in makeshift tents, even as it rains outside. Hospitals and quarantine facilities are overwhelmed. More than 90% of the beds are occupied. 9 people have died in the last 24 hours. Experts are raising an alarm. They fear Hong Kong could report 28,000 cases daily if the outbreak isn't contained. Locals say the administration's zero COVID policy has failed.
There are worries because more or less COVID has affected my daily life. The government wants to achieve dynamic zero COVID status, which has basically made citizens more troubled and confused, because I believe that no virus can be eradicated completely.
If everyone in Hong Kong is willing to get vaccinated, the situation will be better. If you look at mainland China, the vaccination rate is as high as 90%, so that they can control it better. Many people in Hong Kong are only getting the first dose now. So of course the situation now is not as good as the mainland. It is also because the people of Hong Kong lack of confidence in vaccine safety.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. Xi Jinping is now trying to control Hong Kong's response from Beijing. The Chinese president made an unusual intervention on Wednesday. He called out officials in Hong Kong and asked them to take all necessary measures for containment. That message was for Hong Kong's chief executive, Carrie Lam. Today, she was seen greeting health experts from the mainland. Lam said the zero COVID strategy is still the city's best bet, but struggled to share how her administration will stop new infections.
Fighting the pandemic is our paramount task. We would not be distracted by any other things. We will devote every resource and manpower we have. We will impose any measures that we should. The aim is to make sure Hong Kong people's lives and health are protected and to uphold Hong Kong's stability.
Reports say a total lockdown of Hong Kong is now on the cards. If that happens, more than 7 million people will be confined to their homes. Throughout the pandemic, China has relied on the zero COVID strategy and shut down cities at will. Zero COVID has clearly failed in Hong Kong. But Beijing refuses to take any lessons from its failures. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And now we turn to Nepal, which is in the grip of yet another political crisis, one that has pushed Nepal's ruling coalition to the brink of breakdown. There are 5 parties in this coalition that form the government. 2 of them are threatening to break away. Why? because they do not want an American project to be approved in Nepal. The project in question is called the MCC, the Millennium Challenge Corporation. It's an American-funded project aimed at boosting Nepal's electricity sector. The parties against it say it could threaten Nepal's sovereignty. The US suspects China's hand behind this. It says Beijing is trying to manipulate Nepal into getting the project cancelled. A war of words has followed, as have protests in Kathmandu. Reports say the government of Nepal could fall any day. Here's more.
July 2021. A political gridlock in Nepal led to the ouster of Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. A new government was formed through a coalition of 5 parties. 6 months on, this coalition too is on the brink of breakdown. These visuals are from Kathmandu. These people are not your average civilians. They are members of various political groups staging a demonstration outside the Nepalese parliament. What are the protests about? A $500 million deal between Nepal and the United States. It is called the MCC, the Millennium Challenge Corporation Nepal Compact.
We are in opposition to MCC. Not from today. We are in opposition since a few years ago. This is a strike agreement. It is against the country and the people.
Signed in 2017, this deal is aimed at increasing the supply of electricity by strengthening cross-border energy trade between India and Nepal. This deal was expected to boost Nepal's economy by bringing new employment opportunities for its citizens. But 5 years since it was signed, this agreement is yet to be ratified. It hangs like the sword of Damocles over Nepal's parliament. Why? There are a host of reasons. Chief among them is China's involvement in Nepal's affairs. America suspects that Beijing does not want Nepal to support this deal, as it could become a geostrategic counter to the Belt and Road Initiative. Is there merit to this claim? The Chinese state media confirms it. The Global Times published this story on Monday, calling the MCC a geopolitical pact targeting China, a part of America's Indo-Pacific military strategy. Back in Kathmandu, the effects of China's misinformation campaign are evident. Political parties in the ruling coalition are threatening to break away. 2 of them in particular, the Communist Party of Nepal Maoist Center or CPN-MC and the Communist Party of Nepal Unified Socialist. Both these communist forces are known to sympathize with Beijing. Naturally, they are opposing the ratification of MCC. They want some of its provisions to be amended, but reports say they will not budge even if amendments are approved. America, meanwhile, is growing restless. It is warning of implications should the deal be altered or cancelled. The US State Department says this will have an impact on bilateral assistance and support that Nepal receives. The Prime Minister of Nepal is in a fix. He is trying to build consensus within the ruling alliance. What if his efforts fail? The alliance will split, say his party leaders.
Well, Justin Trudeau, meanwhile, keeps stumbling from one crisis to the next. The Canadian Prime Minister is still fighting the Freedom Convoy. And in the process, he's making more people angry, it seems. So who has Trudeau managed to anger this time? The Hindu community of Canada, apparently. It began with a statement. Trudeau was defending his government in Parliament. This was over the Emergency Powers Act. We've been telling you about it. The Canadian Prime Minister has declared a national emergency over the protests. The opposition cornered Trudeau in Parliament. A Conservative lawmaker said the Prime Minister has lost his way. Do you know how Trudeau responded? Watch this.
Positive, optimistic, hopeful vision for public life isn't a naive dream. It could be a powerful force for change. If Canadians are to trust their government needs to trust Canadians. Those are the words of the Prime Minister in 2015. These people, very often misogynistic, racist, women haters, science deniers, the fringe. Same Prime Minister 6 years later as he fans the flames of an unjustified national emergency. So, Mr. Speaker, when did the Prime Minister lose his way? When did it happen?
You're right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas. They can stand with people who wave the Confederate flag.
Well, the MP who quizzed Trudeau is Melissa Landsman, a lawmaker of Jewish origin, a descendant of Holocaust survivors. She says Trudeau, quote-unquote, singled her out, accused her of supporting Nazi sympathizers, and she's demanded an apology, not once but twice. But Trudeau chose to leave the parliament. And it wasn't just Trudeau who made such statements. Jagmeet Singh, another lawmaker, said the very same thing. Allow me to read a quote for you. This is what he's saying. Swastikas and Confederate flags have no place in Canada. We have a responsibility to make our communities safe for everyone. It's time to ban hate symbols in Canada. Very well. Hate symbols have no place in our society, Canada or any other country for that matter. But by making these statements, the Canadian Prime Minister may have further divided his country. Hindu groups in Canada say they're being subjected to hate. And that's because the Prime Minister cannot get his symbols right. Here's what a swastik looks like, what they call the swastika. It's a symbol of divinity and spirituality, not just in Hinduism, but also in Buddhism and Jainism. What Trudeau and Singh were talking about is something else. The Hakenkreuz, the identity of the Nazi party of Adolf Hitler. Some people in the Freedom Convoy are Nazi sympathizers carrying the symbol and the flag, and they can be easily identified. But Hindu groups in Canada say Trudeau's misrepresentation has put their community in danger. One of them is the Hindu Pact, Hindu Policy Research and Advocacy Collective. Let me share with you what they've told Justin Trudeau. We believe this misrepresentation will lead to hate crimes against Hindus and Sikhs. In the past month alone, 6 Hindu temples were vandalized and looted in Canada. Hindu temples have been on target in Trudeau's Canada. The first incident, in fact, happened in November last year. 2 temples were targeted in Brampton, the Hindu Sabha Temple and Sri Jagannath Temple. And in recent months, a number of temples have been vandalized. In at least 6 temples, cash from donation boxes and ornaments from Hindu gods have been stolen. All these robberies have happened in a span of 10 days. There is alarm in the Hindu community of Canada. Here's what an official at a temple said, and I'm quoting again. Whoever is getting this thing done to our temples, they're doing bad to the community, and our government should put their hand in and take out this kind of incident. That's what he said, I'm quoting. Not sure which government he's referring to, the Canadian or the Indian. But will the government, the Indian government, speak on this? Will it express concern about the safety of Indians in Canada? Justin Trudeau did not hesitate in preaching India during the farmer protest. He called them a matter of concern for Canada. Now, his indecision and disappearing act has put democracy in peril. The Freedom Convoy has snowballed into an anti-Trudeau movement and left Canada further divided. With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.
Sophia Vasana. Sophia. משתים, לא מחזיק.
יכול טיפה יותר להיזהר, יפה, עכשיו זה נראה כמו כלום.
זה נפץ פה. לכן יש לנו כאילו ערוץ פתוח, כל צ'אט זה שבועיים. 12 סנטים.